Alright, so the next thing we're going to talk about in SketchUp is the option to do what's called a photo match. What it allows you to do is take an image that has an obvious two-point perspective in it, or relatively easy two-point perspective to track down based on some parallel lines. And you can do a couple different things. You can build a model from an image, or you can at the very least use the image to get reference if you know you have one dimension of a building or so on, but you don't have other dimensions. You can actually use this to build the model even if you don't have those dimensions. So a very simple example of this is going to be based on a bench that we have. So we're going to go to File, Import, and I have this bench which I will provide on Blackboard for you guys. And I'm going to say Open. Again, we want to make sure we're using this as a matched photo. So say Open. So we get are these controls which look a little bit disorienting at this point, but essentially we've got our blue axes and our red axes, and these are going to control our vanishing points for our perspective. So we need to determine areas or lines that would be vanishing to those points, such as the bottom of this bench, top of this bench, and then these lines along the bench itself pointing in the red direction. So I'm just going to use my cursor to grab these corners. I'm going to best as possible. These can all be adjusted later and fine-tuned if need be. But I'm going to take these and move these to these points. So I've got my green direction set. And again, I'm not snapping to anything. This is all approximation, and things are going to look pretty crazy until you get your areas set. But you just want to get these so that the red lines are going along parallel points that would go to a vanishing point, and the same thing with green. And then I'm going to bring my origin and actually bring this to a reference point that I know I'm going to build from. So if all this is set, I should see my blue axes should match up pretty well with the vertical component of this bench. Blue is going perpendicular, and red is also going perpendicular. Now, controlling the size of this is set by this spacing value, and you can see this grid that shows up here. So what we're going to do is we'll set this to whatever the width of the bench is. So we're just going to tell it, let's say it's 20 inches in this case. So I'm going to type 20 inches, hit Tab, and then what I can do, if you notice, if I take my cursor over any of these axes, so it happens over blue, happens over green, or over red, if I click and drag, you'll see that the gridding starts to space out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep dragging this until the grid, which I know is 1 foot 8 inches, matches up with the other side of the bench. I'm actually going to, let me move my origin to the front here so it's easy to tell when. So I can see this dotted grid line, which is the first, is at this endpoint, so I know that this distance across here is going to be 1 foot 8 inches. Okay, so once I've done that, I'm going to click on Done, and just so I don't have to get this isn't in my way, I'm going to close out of this. What you'll notice with having a matched photo, immediately you get a Scene tab up here, because what's going to happen is if I orbit, since I've reset my axes by orbiting, that's going to disappear. At any point you can get back to it by simply clicking back on the tab and reorient your axes and bring your image back. So what I can do is I can start tracing lines along. So I'm going to use left arrow to snap on the green axes, and then I'm going to use up arrow to snap on blue. Alright, so now that I have this corner, I'm just going to switch over to the rectangle tool, because I can start from this corner, give myself this face. So you can see I've sort of outlined what is going to be the edge of this. And if I orbit around, you can see that by itself. Okay, so that's helpful, but the big benefit to this exercise then is what I can do what's calling projecting the photo. So if I do this, it takes the image and it actually puts that on that surface. So now if I orbit, you'll notice it has that image applied to it. So I have this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push this back, and just by looking at this reference I can tell I pushed this back to develop this structure to the bench. And then I can use my offset